Awesome. So today we will be covering job search tips, as well as some networking tips, things like that. I actually have been getting a lot of feedback. I've been asking students, graduates and current students, different things, really trying to incorporate everything you guys are asking for into these slides. Again, feedback is always appreciated. Ping me if you're like, hey, maybe you should add this or whatnot. However, we're going to go over a couple things today. And then I will, of course, send all of this to you guys. And finally, we'll have all 3 recordings, so it'll all be put on the Lambda YouTube channel as well. Perfect. So job search pro tips. Couple of goals for the job search. Keep in mind that all of these things are kind of average, like the average amount of time in each industry. So this is not specific to everyone. Everyone's situation is going to be different. But for the most part, your goal should be to land a job somewhere between 90 and 180 days. That's typically what we see in terms of people graduating from similar programs, just in general, people graduating from school, people, whatever their situation may be, 90 to 180 days is the typical amount of time it takes to get a job. And of course, like there's time in between there where you're interviewing, doing all of these things, but to go from like basically not having a job to then an offer, it's between 90 and 180 days. It could be sometime before 90 days. It might be sometime after 180 days. Again, it's very dependent on your situation and how hard you're working at it. For amount of jobs a day. So this may seem like a very small amount to a lot of people. I always tell people, so 4 to 5 jobs a day. You want to do this because I feel like if you try to apply to 1,000 jobs a day, you're going to get really burnt out. You're going to start forgetting where you applied. The organization of it just kind of goes out the window. So 4 to 5 jobs a day, 4 to 5 applications. The rest of your time literally should be spent doing all kinds of other things that will help you in your job search, practicing code, working on your projects, networking, all kinds of other things. That's going to be more valuable in your day than just straight applying to jobs. Hey guys, make sure you're all muted, okay? I can hear some feedback. On LinkedIn. So I know some of you don't really like LinkedIn. Some of you do. LinkedIn is a super, super valuable tool for networking. There's a lot of students that I've had that say, networking is definitely not their strong suit. They're introverts or whatever the case may be. LinkedIn is a good way to connect with people. It's a cold connection and you don't ever have to leave your chair. And you want these LinkedIn connections because every single recruiter and every single company, we're trained to have a LinkedIn. That's how they find candidates. So you want to be out there. You want to have some exposure on LinkedIn. You want to have the right connections on LinkedIn. Obviously, the more the better. But again, be careful with who you're connecting with on LinkedIn. Make sure they're going to be valuable connections and not just random people that you don't know. And it's always good to have LinkedIn connections that are part of the company you're trying to get into. And then knowing your salary. So we're actually going to talk about this next week, going over offer negotiations, things like that. But you should have already done the research kind of in your area and kind of what the type of job you're looking for is going to be paying. Knowing your salary is going to be super, super valuable for you in your job search. Knowing what you're worth, knowing your skill set, everything like that is going to be super valuable. Then there will be no surprises. You'll kind of know how to start negotiating things. Obviously, your career coaches will help you. But just kind of doing the market research behind your area and behind the job search in general. Perfect. So some different kinds of jobs, specifically in the engineering world, there's kind of 3 main types of positions out there. So obviously full-time, it's usually 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, salaried, usually get some W-2, some benefits, W-2, it's on a W-2. There's also contract positions. So I would say like probably 85% of engineers at some point have been on a contract. It's the nature of the industry because there's a lot of project-based things that you have to do as an engineer. A lot of these positions, are contract positions. It's not a bad thing. I think a lot of people are wary about contracts, but they're actually not a bad thing. The only drawback is that they can sometimes be temporary. So if they tell you that it's a 6-month contract, sometimes they'll end it after 6 months. However, most of the time, if a contract is like 6 months long, they'll end up keeping you for 2 years or whatever the case may be, if you're a good employee. just be careful with contracts. And I've seen a thread about this in general and some of the other channels, but sometimes you'll get a contract that's on a 1099 versus a W-2. A 1099 is a little bit different. You're basically setting up your own business at that point. So they don't take out any taxes for you. You usually don't get benefits or anything like that. And the people that take on 1099s need to be really good about saving money and making sure they know tax information, because at the end of the day, you have to pay back all your taxes on a 1099 instead of them taking it out for you already. So it just gets kind of complicated. There's a lot of forms you got to fill out, things like that. So just be wary of that. If you ever see a company's ever like, yeah, we'll pay you this amount of money on a 1099, make sure you know what you're getting into. The drawback, or I guess like the good point about the 1099 is that they usually pay you more and you can actually leverage that and say like, no, I actually need more than that because I have to pay my benefits and I know I'm going to have to take money out to pay back for taxes. So you can usually get paid a little bit more on a 1099 than a W-2. And either way, like contract is usually a good thing for a lot of people, because full-time salary, you have less to leverage as far as offer negotiations. Like they're already providing you benefits, they're providing you a salary, you're getting PTO, all these kind of things. On a contract, you don't necessarily get PTO. Sometimes you'll get like medical, dental, vision benefits because you're on a W-2. But you get paid for the work you do. So like if you take PTO, there is no PTO. If you take vacation, you're not working, you don't get paid. So contract is actually, there's a little bit more wiggle room as far as offer negotiations go, because you usually make a little bit more money on a contract portion, and you would get paid hourly, obviously. But you would make a little bit more money on the contract side of things. And then freelance work. So again, probably about 90% of developers or engineers, probably you guys right now, or some of our graduates, some of our current students have at some point done some freelance work. It's the nature of the industry. Again, a lot of the companies that you're working with or clients, they need just project-based stuff done. I mean, obviously it's not ideal because, well, it's ideal for some people depending on your situation, but it's definitely not a stable type of environment. Like they can basically cancel your freelance work whenever they want to. There's not really any stipulations in place. You typically don't get any type of benefits or anything like that. And freelance work is a little bit different because sometimes usually they'll pay you hourly. But sometimes they're asking you to put together kind of a bulk amount, and it can get kind of frustrating and difficult to do that. You're like, I don't know how much money I want up front. But again, we can help you with all these things, offer negotiation wise. We're going to be talking about that next week, but just keep in mind, these are kind of the three main type of roles that you're going to be seeing coming along with your job search. Apprenticeships versus internships. So I have some feelings on internships. We'll start with apprenticeships first. Apprenticeships, in case anyone doesn't know, is essentially it's more long-term. Apprenticeships are generally a little bit more in depth. Like instead of just shadowing someone, they're actually bringing you onto this company to train you in order to bring you on full-time when the apprenticeship is done. So you're really actually a little bit more hands-on. A lot of apprenticeships actually pay pretty well. Like I know Microsoft Leap pays somewhere around like $30 to $40 an hour for their apprenticeship. And there's some really, really great apprenticeships out there. It's kind of a mixture between a contract and an internship, except it's a little bit more hands-on. You usually get paid a little bit more, and it's usually long-term. Internships, on the other hand, while there are some really great internships out there, usually an internship, for one, is actually harder to get into than a full-time job because you're competing with a lot of people who are currently in school, and that's usually who they're targeting. So they're sometimes a little bit harder to get into, or they have these stipulations where you have to be like a junior in college or whatever the case may be. And I mean, a lot of you are not. So it's going to be harder to get into an internship just because of that. And it's always super competitive. The other drawback to an internship is that it's pretty short term. Usually it's like a summer internship, or it's only like a 3-month internship. And it's not as in depth. It's not as hands-on. You're not really creating things most of the time in an internship. It's more just like shadowing, kind of like learning that way, which is not a bad thing. But the way that I see it, and a lot of you ask me this, is like, hey, what do you think about me doing an internship or an apprenticeship? We've already had students successfully coming out of this program, even in the very first cohorts, getting full-time engineering roles. So I think at the level you're coming out at, you don't need to do an apprenticeship or an internship. again, it's very situational. If that's what's going to help you build your confidence, or if that's just what you want to do, I mean, go for it. We will help you in any way we can. But just know from my experience and from all of the staff and instructors, Courtney, we think that you guys would come out and be full stack engineers, or just engineers in the software development world. We don't think that you're at the skill level to do apprenticeships or internships. We think that you're above that, basically. But again, that being said, there's a lot of good internships out there. There's a lot of good apprenticeships. If you can get into one, that's great. It's definitely a little bit more competitive though, just on basically the type of candidates that apply. And usually there's stipulations around apprenticeships and internships that require you to be in school or in some kind of school program. It's a good thing though, however, that we have Austin and Holdy and some of these titans that run our programs that know these people who have internships. So we've actually gotten some really good ones. I'm sure you guys have seen me post it. So there's some good ones, especially if we have connections. That's always better. Referrals, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's always a good thing. But just keep in mind, like personally, myself, I think that you guys could come out as engineers, work like a software engineer, making a full-time salary, and you're going to make a little bit more money rather than doing an apprenticeship versus an internship. Cool. Job titles. So I've actually talked to a few of you about this. In the software engineering world, in the technical world in general, there are 1,000 different types of jobs that you could possibly have. Courtney and I will usually ask you guys, like, where do you see yourself working, or where do you want to work? What kind of position do you want to have? And I know at the time that we're usually asking you this, you don't necessarily know, and that's okay. Couple things, you are going to kind of be doing some more hands-on work. Those of you who haven't gone through labs yet. So you're kind of at that point going to realize like, okay, I like to do this more hands-on. I'd rather do back end rather than front end. And even at the end of that, some of you still may not necessarily know what route you want to go. So we've actually put together like probably a list of 100 different titles. I think it's actually 100 titles that we've seen in the technical world, different types of positions, different types of just titles in general that all kind of mean the same thing. But check it out. Do some research behind some of these titles. And this also helps in your job search because you can actually break up your day this way. Like maybe one day you look for a React developer position. The next day you look for a junior developer position, and break up your job search that way. So it's not just monotonous and you don't get burnt out. But again, check these different areas out. There's so many different types of roles that are in the technical spectrum. You don't just have to focus on like full stack developer jobs. And also keep in mind that engineer, developer, program are pretty much all the same thing. Programmer, developer, and engineer all have the same job duties. I'm sure if you ask an engineer versus a developer, they'll tell you something different. But in the HR world and the way that they send out these job descriptions, they're exactly the same. So just keep that in mind. There's no difference if you are looking at software engineer roles rather than software developer roles. So just keep that in mind. Same thing with programmer. You'll see programmer as well. That's not as common as it used to be, but developer and engineer are essentially the same thing. So like a React engineer, React developer are going to have essentially the same job duties, and you're going to see that. But again, if you ask an engineer versus a developer, I'm sure they'll be like, well, we do this and they do this, etc. But know that maybe that's the way it is in like the actual, like their world, but in the HR world and the people writing job descriptions, that's not the way it is for them. And we'll send you guys that list of 100 titles. There's literally so many on there. Okay, so this is something that is required, mostly because it's a great tool. Hunter is an application tracker. The best thing about Hunter is that it's really easy to use. It's colorful. It's easy on the eyes. It's nothing crazy. It's not like a spreadsheet. Hunter is just a really good way of keeping track of where you applied, but there's also all of these other tabs that you can add as far as like if you schedule an interview, you can start moving stuff over. If you get to the offer stage, you can move it over. And I will share with you guys, we have our own kind of Lambda Hunter page. So I will share that invite for you in your Slack channel. But keep in mind, so we have now implemented Hunter and we're making it required because we're going to start using that on basically with Lambda next and everything post-graduation. So we're going to be using this almost as like a leaderboard. They're doing all kinds of technical stuff that I probably am going to butcher if I say it. So I know they're pulling like the Hunter API, but we're essentially using the data that we're gathering from you, from Hunter, and creating a leaderboard, kind of give you guys some friendly competition, give people prizes, incentives, things like that. So 100%, you have to get on Hunter. We will share that invite code with you, and we can see your activity. So just keep that in mind. So if you're not active on it, you're going to get pinged. So just make sure you're active on it. And it does help you guys. It immensely helps. The whole reason people start getting behind on job search and things like that is because they start to get unorganized and time management goes out the window. So Hunter is going to be able to keep you really organized. You'll be able to kind of have more of a time management, like breakdown of what you need to do. So all the jobs you apply to, places that you can start moving it over. And it's fun to see that. It's fun to see that you applied somewhere, you moved onto the phone screen, you moved onto the on-site, you eventually made it to the offer stage. So keep that in mind. We'll be sharing that through the Slack. Okay, so just some job search pro tips in general. So rule of thumb, and I'm sure you guys have heard me say this before, but don't apply to anything that's like 10 days, that has been open for 10 days or longer. I say this because most of those positions, especially if it's like a really well-known company or like a cool company, I guarantee that they already have people in place that they're looking to hire. So if it's been open for 10 days plus, most likely you're going to send your resume in, you're going to go down the rabbit hole of like never hearing back from them. Again, like this is not a guarantee that this will happen. Maybe sometimes you've done that and they call you back. That's fantastic. But for the most part, anything that's 10 days or older, they're already in the process with candidates. So most likely they're not going to get back to you. And this is another big one. So I've actually had a lot of people asking me this too. Any role that doesn't say, like when you're looking at job roles and things, I think the biggest complaints that I get or the biggest issue I get from students is like, all these jobs require a certain amount of experience or blah, 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 or they have certain tools there that I've never used. So any role that you see that specifically doesn't say senior or architect or staff level, principal engineer, if it says 5 years or under, so 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, etc., apply to it. If you have 50% of the type of technology they're looking for, apply to it. They like to cast, when they're doing these job descriptions, a pretty wide net, meaning like they're trying to get the biggest bang for their buck. Most of the time, they don't necessarily need someone with that amount of years of experience or that certain technology. They're just trying to cast a wide net. So apply anyways, take the risk, apply. It's not going to hurt you. If they don't need you as a candidate, they won't call you back or they'll let you know. But if they do, then you're not missing out on this great opportunity because you were afraid to apply. So apply to those types of roles. Anything 5 years and under, anything that doesn't specifically say senior, mid-level, architect level, staff, principal, because those definitely are senior level positions. And anything that you see is like 50%, if you have 50% of those, like whatever tools they're looking for, apply. Does somebody have a question? Okay, y'all make sure you're muted. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Cool. So another big one, do not double apply to any positions. I've had a couple students ask me like, hey, I applied to this role. It's been 2 weeks. Should I reapply? Absolutely not. If it's been 2 weeks, they're most likely already in the process with the candidate. Double applying to a role is an immediate, like they will immediately take you out of the running because they now assume that you're not paying attention because you should have known that you already applied to this role. And it makes you seem like you're just applying to 1,000 different jobs. Like one of those basically people who go on and apply to every single open job they see at a company. You do not want to be that person. So please, that's another reason, great reason to have Hunter, job tracker application. Tracking your applications on Hunter, that's going to help you avoid double applying anywhere. And also only applying to about 4 to 5 jobs a day. That will also help you avoid double applying, but it's a huge no-no. It really is like a red flag for a lot of recruiters. In the same breath, and I have actually heard other people ask me questions about this, it's okay if you see like a couple positions at the same company that you may be interested in. It's okay to apply to a couple. I would say like maybe 3 positions max, because if you start applying to a bunch of different positions at the company, they're not going to take you seriously. They just won't. So obviously if there's like 3 positions that are all kind of similar and you're like, yeah, I think I could do all 3, and you can tell they're on 3 different teams, then yeah, feel free to apply to those 3 positions. But kind of past 3 or 4 jobs at the same company, you're starting to become that person that applies to everything. And that's gonna be a red flag for recruiters. So be careful of doing that too. We already talked about this a little bit. If you can do at least 50% of the things they're asking for, apply. And right under that, so that bullet right under that, a lot of times they'll post things that you guys are like, well, we don't do Java, we don't do Ruby, but they're asking for object-oriented programming languages. They mean that, and pay attention, super pay attention to what they're asking, because most of the time when they say like Java, Ruby, they'll say, or an object-oriented programming language, or OOP. So they're saying like, we're okay with you not knowing Ruby or the things that they specifically list, as long as you know how to do like a certain programming language, or as long as you're comfortable with an object-oriented programming language. So really read the job descriptions. Don't just go and like say, oh, well, they're looking for Ruby, I don't have that. Pay attention to what they're asking for, because a lot of times you can actually say, well, yeah, like I don't know how to do this, but I do know how to do this, and I'm really good at it. So you're always trying to upsell. And a lot of times they're not saying like you only specifically have to have these things. Like we're open to different languages. I've seen so many job descriptions say that people don't pay attention to, and they're like, well, they only ask for Java and I don't know that. I'm like, no, they ask for Java or an object-oriented programming language. So be careful about those in job descriptions. Again, so job search pro tip, this is probably a really important one, because I feel like people get super burnt out with job search. Like this part of the program, you've now gone through all of this curriculum with Lambda School. It's been crazy. You code 40 hours a week. The job search is also a full-time job. That's literally what Lambda Next is going to be about, and what we're here for, because it's not easy. But to avoid getting burnt out, switch up your strategy. Work with your coach to work around your specific situation. Be organized. There's so many different things that you can do to prevent you getting burnt out from this process. Ask for help. We are here to help you. That's literally our job, is to help you on your job search. And another good strategy, and to avoid burning out. So remember, switch it up. If you're not, if basically maybe doing like just cold calling, or just literally trying to find people on LinkedIn, or just applying is not getting you anywhere, switch it up. Do something different. I've had students now, and they may or may not be on this call, that have literally walked into companies and asked for a job, or walked into companies and said, hey, I'm an engineer. Do you guys have anything on your engineering teams? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but at least your day is not boring after that. So just switch it up. You can always be refining your strategy. You can always be working with us to kind of customize your strategy, make sure you don't get burnt out. Job boards and search tools. So I just shared a bunch of, like, I literally have a list I'm about to go over with everyone else, like basically everyone, CS1 through CS8. You guys will get it too, CS9. But there's so many different job boards out there. I've kind of compiled a list of all of the best ones that I've seen, and all of the ones that our students have said are the most successful for them. Before I kind of did that survey and seeing where people, went and the kind of job boards they're looking at, my favorites have always been Built-in. Unfortunately, Built-in is only in certain cities. So if you're in Austin, Boston, Chicago, Colorado, LA, or NYC, get on Built-in. Built-in is kind of like another version of LinkedIn as well. Like you actually create a profile network through Built-in, but they post great jobs. Really relevant, really great jobs. LinkedIn, I always have used LinkedIn. I've had LinkedIn forever. They actually post super relevant jobs. And LinkedIn's good about taking down jobs when they're no longer open, or when they're no longer accepting applications. You want that, because it sucks to apply to a job that you're like, oh, this is great. It just opened like a couple days ago, and then you just never hear back. But it's probably because it's a repost and they're not even looking for that person. So LinkedIn's really good about taking down job postings that are no longer relevant or no longer open, things like that. Glassdoor. So I love Glassdoor because obviously when you're looking at a position, you can also then go check out the company review. And that's always easy. It's a convenient place, do it all in one place. But there's also some really good ones. So Google search, as weird as it sounds, there's literally a Google function where you go into an open new Google search bar, type in software developer job in Austin. It'll pull up this little blue box, and basically it's a job board scraper. So Google tries to accumulate all of the similar titles it can find and puts it in one list of all the different job boards it can pull from. And then you can customize the filters, things like that. So it's kind of just a big comprehensive list. Not all of the job boards are on there, but it pulls from quite a few. AngelList. I know a lot of you guys love AngelList. I've posted jobs off of there. AngelList is like specifically for startups and smaller companies. Built-in is kind of like that too. be careful with AngelList. Sometimes they spam you a little bit, but I've seen people get success from AngelList as well. A couple of these other ones. So the main one I did want to talk about is Slack. Obviously, you guys, some of you have seen that Courtney and I have job seekers channels. We try to post jobs in there from all over, from all the cities that we know our students are in, and all of that is in Slack. The other thing about Slack is that anytime you go to a meetup or anything like that, they usually have a Slack channel, and they will always have a hiring sub-channel. So like Ladies Who Tech or Women Who Code, all of those different meetups and like events, they always have some type of Slack channel, and they will have like a hiring or jobs sub-channel. Check those out. Those are people that are local, that have jobs available. Check them out. Slack is a huge tool for networking too, obviously. And then Hacker News is here. GitHub is here, GitHub Jobs. So there's like a lot, trust me. You guys are going to get this presentation, but this is kind of a comprehensive list that I found that will kind of break up different jobs boards for you. This is another way you can organize your job search. Maybe one day you check on LinkedIn, the next day you check on Hacker News, etc. So this is another way you can just help break up your job search a little bit. But just kind of, I separated them into categories. So the job board links that are kind of just comprehensive jobs are up at the top. A lot of you have asked me about remote job boards. We Work Remotely is my favorite one. I think it's the most, it has the most jobs on there. It has the most relevant jobs on there. There's a couple other ones I added there too. And then diversity driven job boards. There's a few different ones. If you guys have any other ones, I'd love to see them. There's not too many great ones out there, which is sad, but there should be. But this is just a comprehensive list that we put together just from students, just from hearing other people's feedback and where they found success. One thing I do want to mention specifically around job boards. So when you see a job posted on LinkedIn, say the job is at, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson. You see the job posted on LinkedIn and there's like an easy apply. And this is usually like an easy apply for a lot of these job boards. I would rather you guys go to the actual company site just in case that like LinkedIn or any of these job boards forgot to take down the posting, because a lot of these job boards will repeat postings or recycle them. So if they don't get any action within like 5 days, they'll repeat it and then it shows up as like a brand new job opening. But anytime you see any type of job posting, make sure you go to the company page. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes these are like third parties and they will force you to apply to these job boards. But if you can, I'd rather you guys apply at the actual company site, because then you can make sure that the job's still open. If you go to the company site, sometimes you'll go to the company site and there's not even a job listed like that. That means the job's not open. That means it was a repost. So anytime you can go to the actual company site, that's always better. But you'll see the postings, more postings on the job boards, obviously. If you have any questions about that, we can kind of cover that as well. Job description says not to follow up anyways. You guys know I'm like a follow-up queen, thug life, obviously. Follow-up is going to be super important. I know that that's one of the main frustrations that people face in the job search, that they apply and then they never hear back. And then I'm like, well, did you follow up? And they're like, no. So follow-up is so important, you guys. Sometimes recruiters they're bogged down. They have a lot of things on their plate. They have a lot of recs going on at the same time. You just have to remind them that you're there. Following up. Any questions before we move on to networking and all of that? Any questions around job search, job boards, job search tips, anything like that?
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, I guess it might have to do with the last little lecture too, but so in terms of applying to multiple jobs, you said about 5 jobs a day after graduation. Should we be writing a new cover letter every time, tailoring it towards the company and what we can offer that they're looking for? And should we be tailoring our resume in a specific way for each different kind of company?
Okay, so I have super thoughts about cover letters. I'm sure some of you have heard me say this before. I actually have a cover letter presentation that I specifically don't share with resume and LinkedIn. I was a recruiter for 6-ish years before I ever became a career coach, before I ever joined any type of company like Lambda. Not one time did I ever read a cover letter. And a lot of our job postings required it. Not one time did I read it. And I was the gatekeeper. I was the one who sent resumes on. So my feelings about cover letters is that people spin their wheels trying to customize cover letters. They're trying to make it look, the best way possible. And they spin their wheels and spend hours and hours trying to customize these cover letters when most of the time they don't get seen. And another thing is that a lot of companies actually don't require them anymore because they know that, because they don't feel like reading cover letters, so they just don't require them. However, if you ever need a cover letter, if it's required, please let me know. I will send you the presentation, but keep in mind that cover letters are not the same that they used to be. Like, your cover letter should not be, "Dear hiring manager, I'm really interested in this job, blah, 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 blah. These are my skills, blah, blah, blah." That's not what a cover letter is anymore. When they're asking for a cover letter, they basically mean your elevator pitch. So remember, we talked about past, present, future. You're describing who you are, what your background is, why you want to be an engineer, why you're passionate about it, and what you plan on helping the company with. Obviously, it would be the future portion. That is a cover letter. And it's not as formal as it used to be. It should be a little bit more of a casual conversation. Actually, this kind of directly goes into what we're going to be talking about next, which is like informational interviews, doing cold emails, things like that. That is a cover letter nowadays. And even if they require an actual cover letter, like a document that's a cover letter, that's what they're looking for. They want past, present, future. They want your elevator pitch. They want to know a little bit about you and how you're going to fit in with the team. Kind of just seeing what your soft skills are before they meet with you. Does that make sense? So no, I don't think that you need to customize your resumes at all. The way that Courtney and I help you guys with your resumes and the way that we structure the resume, you shouldn't have to keep changing it. I mean, obviously, as you grow as an engineer, you're going to be adding more skills on there. You're going to be adding more experience, more projects, but you shouldn't have to go in and change certain things because you should never lie on your resume. So you shouldn't be customizing it. If you see a job that has Java on it, you should not be putting Java on your resume unless you know Java, because they'll ask you about it. So you should not be customizing your resume at all. For the cover letter, again, it shouldn't be as long as a cover letter, so it really shouldn't take you long. It's an elevator pitch, and the only thing that you're customizing as part of that I guess the cold email or the cover letter that you have to send is the future portion, because obviously you want to relate everything that you're saying to the actual company you're applying to. So keep that in mind, and if you have, trust me, I will share my little cover letter PDF with you. I'll help you write a cover letter. Courtney will help you write a cover letter. We'll help you with your cover letter. But just know that if it's not required, don't spin your wheels doing it, because most likely no one's going to read it. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions around like job search, boards, before we move on to the next presentation?
I've got a couple quick ones.
Yes.
With all the contract work I've been doing lately, when I'm looking at my resume, I don't know how to not just fill up a massive amount of, I worked for this company, I worked for that company, or make it look too pithy and say, I've been freelancing for a while. Do I put each individual thing into projects, or do I just have a bullet point, maybe of all the separate things I've done under the last 3 months of contracting? Because it's starting to pile up in a good way, but I'm having a hard time making it not look really awkward on the resume.
What's question.
Rule of thumb for that?
Good question. So the way, and this goes for freelancing too, so whether you are like an actual contractor, or you've just been doing freelance work, to do that and to make sure you're not like having 1,000 different stacked like 3-month little increments, your title and your like the company name would be contractor, or like the company name would be freelance work. And then your big description for that would be all of your clients. And then you do that from like 2010 to now to present. So all of your clients and your projects are in that description, but your like title and your job basically would be labeled contractor or freelance work, or software development contractor. Again, we will help you customize this, and that's going to be different for everyone, just depending on what the situation was. But the best way to kind of do that without having like, I was here for 2 months, is to kind of combine all of them and just have from like 2000, whenever you started, to present.
In the similar vein, oh no, it just escaped me. Oh man, it's such a similar question, but nope, it's escaped me. Sorry, waste of time.
If you think of it, throw it in Slack. We'll be looking at all of that later too, or also ping your coach, and you can work individually on that as well. Cool. Any other questions?
I have a question. When you actually fill out a form and they ask you for salary, do you actually put something in there? Or I've had instances where I just put NA and where I leave it blank.
So we're actually going to be talking about that next week. But just so you guys know, high level, if they ever ask for, if they make it a requirement to put in something for your salary, my rule of thumb, and we're going to be covering this next week too, is so 10K from your walkaway point. So say your walkaway point, you can't make anything less than 60K. You give them a range, a 20K range, but add 10K to your walkaway rate. So you would give them, if your walkaway rate's 60K, you give them a range of 70 to 90K. So, and you always like kind of set them up that way. If they're asking you for your salary, they shouldn't be, because you haven't even interviewed yet. You don't even know really what the team is about. But if it's required on your application, you do a 20K range if you can. If you can't, then put the top of your 20K range, put 90K. And all they'll tell you is like, hey, like that's not doable. And you can say, well, I'm willing to be flexible depending on the opportunity. Otherwise, I would put a range, 20K range, but 10K additional from your walkaway point, because you always want to give yourself some cushion for salary negotiation. That being said, you can also do NA, and they can't do anything about that. So if they allow you, because sometimes they won't actually, you have to put in a number. So sometimes they won't allow you to do that. But if you can put NA, I would do that too. Because at the end of the day, like they shouldn't be asking you your salary at the very beginning before you've even met with the team or anything. You don't know what the opportunity is like. You don't know what the culture is like yet. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. And even if they ask you like right off the bat in like a phone interview what you want for your salary, you do the same thing. You either say, well, I'd rather hear about the opportunity first and then decide. Oh, are you guys hearing me okay?
Yeah, you just dropped off
for a second.
Okay, perfect. Let me know if it starts to get wonky. But yeah, so just keep that in mind. And again, we're here to help you negotiate salary, and we'll talk a little bit about that next week. Cool? Okay, guys, I'm going to move on to the networking portion. Let me pull it up. Is everyone hearing me okay?
Yeah, you just got some lag going on.
Okay. Not really sure what to do about that at this point. I have a lot of you guys on here. In the meantime, while it's fixing itself, I'm going to share my screen again and pull up the new presentation. And yeah, you guys, so I appreciate you all having your camera on, but it might help to turn them all off now. Perfect. All right, I'm going to screen share. If it gets super choppy, I can't see once I'm in full screen mode, so ping Courtney. She'll let me know, and we'll kind of work out from there. Cool. All right, share the screen. All right. Okay, so the other side of job search is some people love this part of it, some people hate this part of it. The most beneficial and fastest and most efficient way I've ever seen anyone get a job is through networking and through referrals. So even if you hate this, again, we're trying to give you some tools so that you can do this and work on it, because literally getting referrals and networking and knowing people in the industry is the easiest way to get a job. I promise. So that's what we're going to go over right now. So cold outreach. Cold outreach is literally any time that you reach out to somebody that you didn't previously know or that you have not previously been connected to. That can be anything from reaching out to people on LinkedIn. So I'm sure like a lot of you think that you haven't done cold outreach, but you have. If you've reached out to anyone on LinkedIn that you've never been connected to, that's cold outreach. Sending people emails that you don't know, that's cold outreach. Cold calling, cold walking into companies is also cold outreach. Anytime that you've ever just basically reached out to someone who didn't previously know. And we'll kind of go over some ways that you can do that. So, the cold outreach email. This is probably everyone's like most dreaded thing, or even like just sending any kind of message, and you're probably going to go over it 1,000 times until you get it right. Also, we can help you with those. So just remember, when you're doing a cold outreach email, you're not trying to give them your whole life story. It's a little bit of a condensed elevator pitch, but without the whole, like, this is my whole background, this is what I'm looking to do. It's a little bit like, hi there. Hi, Nancy. I noticed you guys had an open position for a React developer in San Diego. I noticed, you guys are a finance company. I have a financial background. I think with my skills in finance and now my new skills as a developer, I'd be a really good addition to the team. I'd really love to chat, get your advice on it. Send it. Keep it super short, 3 to 5 sentences. Again, you don't want to give them your whole life story. You're not necessarily giving them like the whole version of your elevator pitch. It's more like a little bit on background, a little bit about what you can do now, and a little bit about how you can help their company. So keep that in mind. It does not have to be long. It doesn't have to be 5 paragraphs. It doesn't have to be super formal. Keep it casual. Again, you don't want to be like, hey, what's up? Nice to meet you. Like, let's hang out. That's too casual. You still want to have a level of professionalism to it. Obviously, it's an email. Check for typos. Make sure that you have good grammar, everything like that. But it doesn't have to, the tone of the email doesn't have to be like, I'd really love to meet with you and talk about this job. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be a little bit more casual. You're asking for, usually I go about this and tell people to ask for advice, because who doesn't want to like talk about all their knowledge that they have, instead of just straight up saying like, I'd love to work for your company, hire me. Like, that's a little aggressive, first of all. Second of all, you're going to get better feedback on that and more responses if you're saying it like, I really just want to chat and, see what the company's all about, or see how what your position's all about. I'd love to get your advice on, what it's been like working there. Everyone wants to talk about themselves. Like, it's a human kind of thing that we do. People love talking about themselves. So that's always how I tell people to position it, rather than like, I'd really love to work for the company. Please hire me. Let's talk. So just keep that in mind. People always like to talk about themselves. It's always good to go the route of like asking for advice. If you're introduced, so say you have a referral, somebody refers you, they introduce you via email, and then this kind of relates to any kind of way you're introduced. But if you're introduced, address the person you've been introduced to, be friendly. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm so excited that we were able to connect. Always thank the person who introduced you. You don't want to come off as rude or like not appreciative. So make sure you always thank the person who introduced you. And then from there, so now you've established, like you've gotten your introduction, you thank the person who introduced you. Now is when you start essentially, it's not cold outreach anymore, because now you have a level of introduction. So it's no longer cold outreach. So this is where you can be a little bit more bold with your message, and ask that person to meet up for coffee, ask that person to lunch, ask that person to hop on a phone call with you. It doesn't always have to be an in-person meeting. It's ideal if you can get an in-person meeting, but it doesn't always have to be in person. It can be over, Zoom chat. It can be over your phone. But you're asking this person again, like, hey, thank you so much for introducing me. That person kind of just goes off into cyberspace. And then the new person that you've been introduced to, I really would just love to chat about, what your experiences have been at this company. I've always been really interested in cryptocurrency. I think what you guys are doing is really neat. I'd love to get your advice on a couple things. When would you be available to get some coffee? Super casual, short and sweet. And that's it. That's how easy it is. They can either say yes or no. Or they can say, hey, I really don't have time to meet up for coffee, but I can jump on a 15-minute phone call. That works. That's another in. It's okay. It's okay if they can't meet for coffee. It's okay if they can't meet in person. A lot of times they'll just jump on a phone call with you. You're still getting this referral. You're still getting basically meeting this new person. You're adding to your network. Informational interviews. So informational interviews mean a lot of things to different people. I actually used one of the students on here, their little video that they sent over. I actually have followed millennial, I don't even remember her name is, but she has really good videos on, she's VP of operations or VP of people at a company, and she has really good insight on informational interviews and just things in general that will help you connect. And I actually have a video posted later about that. But informational interviews are one of the best ways to network with people. Again, an informational interview is literally you're asking somebody for advice or asking them about themselves. People love talking about themselves. There's something about when someone's like, tell me your story. You want to tell someone your story. So that's always the best way to approach informational interviews. So for instance, you reach out to someone on LinkedIn. You're like, hey, I've really always been following your company. I think it's really interesting what you guys do. If you ever get a chance, I'd really love to meet up, get your advice on a couple of things. Sure, let's meet. That's their response to you. couple of do's and don'ts for informational interviews. Research before chatting. You should actually be doing your research before reaching out, period. Know what you want to say in your message. Don't just kind of like blind message this person. Have something that will set you apart a little bit. So again, asking for advice is always going to be a good thing. But make sure that they can tell that you've done your research so that you know what the company is about. You know what their team is about, for instance. You know a little bit something about maybe that person because you can see their LinkedIn profile, because you can connect in so many different ways. Like, hey, I noticed you went to the same school I did. That's super cool. Like, how did you end up finding this career path, or whatever the case may be? So do your research about that person, about the company before you reach out. And then in your message, show that you've done your research. Put a little tidbit in there that's unique to whatever that person is or that company is. Be respectful of their time. So again, remember that don't be discouraged for like, I can't meet for coffee. Like, I don't have time to do that. They're probably working really hard, especially if they're engineers. So it's okay to say, that's totally fine. If you have like a couple minutes to chat on your way home from work, I would love to do that as well. Just really wanted to get your advice. So it's okay. So be respectful of their time. Know that they are also, very busy, especially if they do set up a meeting with you. Make sure you're on time, and make sure that if it's a 30-minute meeting, you don't end up talking for 45 minutes, unless you can tell that's the vibe of the conversation, and that person is not like looking at their watch like, hey, I gotta go. Because you need to be respectful of their time. Follow up. Again, follow up is literally my favorite phrase that I say throughout all of these presentations. Just because you met with this person one time doesn't mean they're going to necessarily remember you or remember your face. So follow up with them. Hey, thank you so much for meeting with me last week. All the advice you gave me was so great. Just want to follow up and thank you again. If you guys have anything in your pipeline, I would love to be part of such a great organization. Follow up with them. Make sure that they remember your face. Make sure they remember your voice. Make sure they remember who you are. That's what follow-up is about. And then cold emails, cold calls, cold LinkedIn messages. So this is how you get an informational interview most of the time. And it's so simple. It's really just about reaching out to that person. Again, I always go the route of asking for advice or asking them about things about themselves, basically. Professional. The only real thing that you could ask professionally about somebody is kind of mention is like some school they went to, maybe an organization they worked for. Obviously you don't want to be creepy in any way and be like, oh, I noticed your favorite color is red. That's my favorite color. Like, that'd be weird. So just make sure that you're, again, doing your research, that you know a little bit about the company that you're talking about, or the team, or that person in general, which is the beauty of LinkedIn. You can kind of see some of the details about them. But you can do anything from cold email, cold calling them, LinkedIn messages. To be fair, in the day and age that we're at now, it's hard to cold call somebody and then they're like, yeah, let's meet up for coffee. That it would be a little bit more difficult, I will say. Some people don't take that necessarily as like a positive thing. So probably cold emails and LinkedIn messages are going to be a little bit easier just for everyone included. And then you lead to a phone call from there. But sometimes it works. Sometimes cold walking into a business leverages you an offer. So you never know. It's about being comfortable in your own situation. Some major don'ts for an informational interview. So an informational interview is not a job interview. You're literally gathering information from this person. You're asking them about advice about the company, about their whatever career path they've gone on to, whatever you want to ask them about as far as like advice or information. You're never asking for a job. You're never flat out saying like, well, I brought you here today because I really want to work for your company. Like, you're going to freak them out, first of all. Second of all, like, you didn't set the conversation up that way. So you cannot now pose that conversation like that. You don't want to. You're not trying to basically like wedge your way in and be like, hey, make sure that you refer me. You want them to be comfortable referring you. You want them to remember you as like, wow, they listened to my whole story. They were like really interested in what I had to say. I'm going to refer this person to this job. That's what you want. You're trying to keep it on more of a friendly basis. And create a warm contact, a warm referral, a warm lead. Don't rant about yourself. So this goes back to making sure that you're watching the time, making sure that you're not just ranting and raving about yourself. This is an opportunity for them to talk and you to listen, because again, people love talking about themselves and you want them to feel comfortable kind of talking about different things. You will lead the conversation on questions. So ask a question, let them talk. That's basically how that would work. An informational interview, they should not be leading the conversation really. Like they shouldn't be the ones asking questions. They will. I mean, they're going to ask you some questions every once in a while, but you should be the one who has questions prepared about the company, about their career path, whatever you wanted to talk to them about, have questions prepared. Like know what you want to ask them already. You're asking questions, they're answering, you're listening. That's how that works. That's an informational interview. So again, if you're ever meeting with someone, even if you're doing like a phone call or whatever the case may be, a Zoom meeting, make sure it's convenient for both of you. You don't ever want to like show up late or push them to a little very small, tiny time slot where they're having to rush the conversation. You want them to remember you and feel comfortable with you. So convenience, make sure everything's convenient for both parties. Date and time, make sure, again, like they're probably very busy people. So if you set a date and time, don't go changing it 4 or 5 times unless they have to change it. Like make sure it's convenient for them too, to change the time and things like that. And then again, have questions prepared. They should not be like, okay, so what are we talking about today? You should already have your questions prepared, know what you want to talk about, ask, and then listen. And that's how the conversation should go. They probably will ask you some questions too, because you're opening up a conversation. But for the most part, like you should be really having the questions like, oh, tell me about like how you even found this kind of opportunity or whatever the case may be. Questions for them first. So Self-Made Millennial, that's who that is. She's a YouTube blogger, video blogger. And one of our students shared it and I loved it. And I found her informational interview little talk and I loved it. But also Caleb shared with us a long time ago, 3 steps to a perfect informational interview. Both of these are great. The first article just basically breaks down kind of what we talked about today, like how you go about it. And then for Self-Made Millennial, and I just noticed a typo, is going to be just kind of walking you through how you ask questions and things like that. So they're both great. But informational interviews, guys, they sound scary in theory, but it's really just asking people about their lives, asking about how they got into certain companies, how they went about their career search, things like that. It's easier done than said, I guess. Yeah. And we can always help you. We can always help you draft up kind of a cold email to start that conversation. That's what we're here for. Okay, so networking tips in general. Again, this goes back to, I feel like a lot of people are like, I don't like networking. Like, I don't like going out there. I'm an introvert, whatever the case may be. Believe it or not, a lot of us are introverts. We have just learned how to play the game of networking because, especially in the engineering world, it is a lot about who you know. And honestly, guys, we have a leg up with Lambda because like Austin, all of the executives, a lot of the instructors, staff, we all know a lot of people. So you kind of have a leg up on that front. But a couple do's to kind of start building that network on your own. Use LinkedIn. I know some of you don't like LinkedIn, but it works. You can definitely build up your network on LinkedIn. And I've told some of you this, but every time you go and like follow a company, all of their like news, sometimes their job postings will show up in your dashboard, like your news feed. So make sure you're following companies on LinkedIn, companies that you're interested in. You can follow people, like influential people in the tech world. All of those articles and stuff will show up on LinkedIn. That will only help you, kind of figure out, like do research, have some questions prepared along those lines. So many different things. Go to meetups. So you can go to a meetup, even if especially if you're like very wary of meetups so far, because sometimes it's hard to go and like, not know anyone, you feel a little bit awkward. So instead of kind of jumping into a big tech meetup, unless you want to, you can kind of start taking it slow. Go to a meetup that is like something that has to do with your hobby. See what it's like, and then slowly start making your way to these tech meetups. There's so many tech meetups, you guys. And obviously some of you live in smaller areas. It might be a little bit more difficult, but if you don't have a meetup in your area, create one. You start a meetup, because I'm sure there's other people who would love to hear about whatever you're starting a meetup about. So if there's not one in your area, try to start one up yourself. That's a good way to network. That's a good way to take initiative. But meetups are really awesome, especially tech meetups, because you never know what you're going to get sometimes. Like sometimes it'll be like a React meetup, but then all of a sudden it's like hiring, and then there's hiring partners there. You practice whiteboard stuff. You meet CEOs. So you never know what to expect at a meetup, but it's a good thing, like in a good way. Use good grammar. So networking tips, this directly goes back to cold emails, cold messages. While you're still keeping it casual and everything like that, make sure that you're still as professional as possible, meaning you don't send them any kind of messages or whatever from a wonky email, like make sure it's a professional email that you're sending it from. Make sure that you have good grammar, no typos. Like you don't want to be that person who has typos, aka what I just had in my presentation. I'm so mad at myself. But still, like you don't want to be that person, especially if you're trying to put your best foot forward and like have this person meet with you and want to collaborate with you a little bit. So make sure your messages have good grammar, good spelling. Use networking apps. So there's 1,000 different kinds of networking apps. I have Bumble on here, but it's not the same kind of Bumble that you guys are thinking of. It's like strictly for like professional networking. And there's so many different kinds of networking apps, networking websites that you can go to. But just try different arenas, try different things with networking. Try to meet up with people who are like-minded, who can help you in your career. That's what networking is all about. Network with recruiters. So there's a stigma that some people are like, I don't want to work with recruiters. They just spam you. There's some really good recruiters out there. I was a staffing recruiter, and I have to say, like, I was a good staffing recruiter. Like, I made sure that I put my candidates first, and basically it's a second set of eyes on the job search for you. They're only helping you. Now, of course, I say that, but be wary of those like outsourced recruiters who are sending you jobs on, I don't know, C# and ASP.NET, and you don't even have anything like that in your resume. They're spamming you, obviously. They just did a keyword search and you maybe had one or two of the things they were looking for, and then they reached out to you. Just be wary of the recruiters you talk to, but like, ask me if you have any questions like, hey, I don't know about this firm, or I don't know about this company or this recruiter, just ask me. I know most of the big ones. And if I don't, I'll do the research for it. Make sure that you're talking to the right person, make sure that nothing's shady. But recruiters, for the most part, can always help you. Follow up, favorite phrase, make sure you're following up. Even with events, like if you're like asking a question about an event, you don't hear back, follow up with them. Like, hey, I'm really interested in this event. I'd like to go. I haven't heard from you. Is it still happening, or whatever the case may be? Same thing with informational interviews. Follow up afterwards. Thank them for their time. Make sure they remember your face, remember your voice, remember the things you talked about a little bit. Follow up is key. Lambda Networking Slack channel. You have already a built-in network at Lambda of like over 1,000 people or something crazy like that. So use your Lambda network. We actually have a Lambda networking channel that one of our students created. Get in there, network with your fellow peers, network with alumni. A lot of our alumni are working. They could potentially get you jobs. Or you can start, making these connections with some of your fellow peers. Maybe you guys can start a startup. You never know. So network with people, network with the Lambda community. Be yourself. So again, when you're networking, you don't ever want to be like a cheesy salesman. You want to make sure you're being yourself, because you're networking with people that are probably very similar to you, that at one point were, starting off in a new engineering world. They'd never done it before. They had obstacles to face. So be yourself. Be genuine. Tell them your struggles. Tell them how you'd like to fix them. Tell them how you can help them. Ask them questions along those lines. Like, how did you overcome, imposter syndrome, things like that. Be yourself and be brave. So that's kind of like a big one, because I feel like a lot of people are afraid to put themselves out there because of rejection. That's part of life. And I know that's something that I can say, and it still sucks when it happens, but being brave taking some risks is going to leverage so many more opportunities for you, open so many more doors than not doing it. Because then you'll never know. You'll never know if it could have been a positive thing or not. Sometimes you're going to get rejected. It's okay. It's okay. We get rejected all the time. When I was doing my job search, and mind you, I created all this curriculum, I know all these things, I still got rejected. And I'm like, wait, what? But it's okay. You move forward. If they're rejecting you, it wasn't meant to be. So that's how I look at it. So be brave. Go to meetups. Talk to new people. Present at meetups. I know that that's also a very scary thing to do, but you never know. Like, maybe if you're brave that day, you speak at a meetup, there's a CEO there and they're like, I really liked that. That was a very brave thing for you to do. Let's talk. I have this position. So you just never know. Being brave is going to definitely leverage some more contacts, more opportunities for you guys. So there's some don'ts for networking. So shotgun approach. This goes back to being genuine and being yourself. And also making sure that you're making like good connections, leveraging good connections rather than just a ton of connections that aren't necessarily good. So don't do the shotgun approach. Connect with people that you know are going to help you in your career, or be someone who's very like-minded. Don't just connect with as many people as you can find. That's the opposite of what you should be doing on LinkedIn. Connect with people that you know would be influential within their teams, people that you're like, hey, I think I would have a lot in common with that person. Don't just connect with a bunch of different people. That's not going to get you anywhere. Don't be disrespectful of other people's time. And so when you ever go to an event or anything like that, don't just be that person who talks everyone's ear off either. Like, you can always tell kind of the cues. If someone's kind of like not really interested in the conversation, excuse yourself, let them mingle as well. These meetups are for everyone to network, not just you to network with other people. Like, everyone wants to network, so don't hog their time, basically. Don't get toasted. So a lot of these meetups and these events, these hiring events, different things like that, they usually provide food or alcohol. Remember that you're still trying to present yourself as a professional. 100%. Get a drink, calm your nerves a little bit. It'll help. Get some food. You don't want to pass out, but don't get toasted. Don't be that person who everyone's talking about for the wrong reasons. Be a professional, but also if they provide drinks and food, you can have that. I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying be professional about it. Know your limits. Don't come in hot. This is exactly what I meant by saying, like, yeah, hire me. Like, you never want to come off as super aggressive or like super like, yeah, like, I'm really good at what I do and you guys should hire me. You should make a place for me on your team. While I want you to be brave, you don't want to be aggressive either. You're being brave, but in a genuine way. You're still needing to be genuine. You still need to be yourself. You don't want to be the person that is just arrogant and cocky and, just basically demanding things. You're trying to leverage this connection as like, I would love to get your advice. Remember, things like that. You're not saying like, hey, I want to work for your company, hire me. Will that work for some people? Sure, if you say it the right way. Will that work for a lot of us? Probably not. So just be wary of that. Don't overshare. These conversations are very casual conversations. The only time that you should mention anything like specific is if you are talking about any type of thing on their like LinkedIn profile. For instance, and nothing about them. Don't be super personal and be like, oh, I love the color of your hair. I noticed you just changed it. It was blonde in your picture. Like, that's creepy. So don't do that. But if you have to talk about something along the lines of like a business they worked at or a school they went to or like a program they've done that's maybe similar to a program you've done, you can do that. That's okay. But you don't want to overshare and be like, oh my God, like, I noticed that you're in a relationship. I'm in a relationship too. Like, that's weird. You don't want to talk about anything personal about yourself. And remember, this portion of networking is you asking them questions about, how they can help you basically, or like advice on what they did. How are they successful? So it's not really you talking about your life story. So be wary of that. This also kind of goes hand in hand with not getting too toasted. People tend to overshare when they drink a lot. So just be wary of that. And then again, don't be offended if you get rejected, or don't be offended if they don't follow up. It's not going to work every time, you guys. And rejection always sucks. Feeling ignored always sucks, but you keep grinding, you keep doing it. And the more times you do it, the more, and then you'll see like what works, what doesn't work, what kind of people you should talk to, what kind of people you shouldn't talk to. It's a process. So it's okay. We all get rejected. Just don't be offended. Don't take it personally. If they had really nothing to say, you move on to the next person. Maybe you don't want to work for that company anymore. So those are kind of just some do's and don'ts. So these here, Eventbrite, Meetup, TechCrunch, LinkedIn, there's 1,000 different other sites as well. And there's some that are like super specific to like local areas, but these are just a couple of sites that show you the different meetups in your area, events going on, hackathons. You guys, hackathons, I think people forget that they're very technical. You're obviously doing a hackathon. You're probably creating a project, learning something new. But at a lot of these hackathons, they'll actually bring you on. They'll explain the project, what you're about to do, and then they'll say, this is actually sponsored by Google, and they're going to be talking about some of their positions later on. A lot of these hackathons turn into hiring events, essentially, because you're showing off your work, which is awesome. And you're doing it kind of in a more like relaxed setting. So it's like you're networking, but you don't really have to work at it. So hackathons are really great for that. Find hackathons in your area. And again, some of you live in these smaller areas or just like less populated, where there's not a lot of stuff going on. Create a meetup or try to find a virtual meetup. Those are just as efficient. So there's so many different routes you can go for networking, y'all. And just know that referrals, networking, things like that, it's the other half of the job search. And it's probably the most efficient and the easiest way to get into a job. So perfect. Alrighty, I will open it up for some questions. Let me stop sharing this. Perfect. Any questions around networking? I know that was like a lot of information. No questions? None? Y'all are speechless? All right. Well, so a couple different activities for you guys today. Again, I will always post this in the PDF version of these presentations will be in your Slack channel along with the titles for tech. We will also be posting the Hunter invite code. You have to join Hunter. It's mandatory. If you don't join it, we'll ping you. So just join it. Or Holdy will yell at you, or Brian. So just join it. And we want you to do a couple things with Hunter. So once you join, your activity is to find 3 different companies. So there's a wish list column in Hunter that basically is like jobs that you would love, like your dream companies. So in your wish list column for Hunter, we want you guys to try to find 3 different companies that you love to work for. It can be more than 3, but it has to be minimum 3 companies. They don't have to be in your area. They can be whatever companies, your dream companies in your wish list tab. So that's your first activity. Your second activity is to try to find some type of meetup. It doesn't necessarily have to be a tech meetup. It can be like a hobby meetup or something you'd be really interested in going to that's in your area, and post it in your CS9 or /Labs alums channel. We want to see what kind of events are in your area. And if you can't find one, because we've had students who can't find one, tell me about a meetup that you would love to start, that maybe potentially we could help you kind of start your own meetup. So Hunter, join Hunter, 3 wish list companies, and also post about a meetup in your area in your Slack channel. And if you can't find one, create one, or give us at least an idea of one that you like to create. Sound good? Alrighty, everybody, if you have any questions, I'm about to open Slack back up again, or feel free to ping your career coach individually. I will see all you lovely folks probably later in this week and also Wednesday of next week. Have a wonderful afternoon.